Order, order. We start with questions. The Secretary of State for Transport, Dr. Neil Shastri-Hurst.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Officials will continue to work with Chiltern Railways to support the delivery of its fleet renewal programme to improve passenger experience and drive sustainable growth across the region. Chiltern is exploring options to expedite its procurement of additional trains, whilst following robust assurance steps to ensure it has a strong business case that delivers value for money for the taxpayer.
Dr. Neil Shastri-Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At over 30 years of age, Chiltern Railways has the oldest fleet of any operator. Additional capacity is needed to meet the demands of my constituents in Solihull West and Shirley. Whilst I welcome the Department's commitment to reducing overcrowding by moving more rolling stock to where it's needed in the network, is the Minister able to expand on the specific steps that are being taken by the Department to reduce overcrowding on the Chiltern mainline?
Minister.
Thank you for your question. Chiltern's business case assesses both like-for-like and enhanced capacity rolling stock options. Like-for-like offers similar capacity to the current fleet, but more modern trains to deliver a better customer proposition. Enhanced capacity trains enables Chiltern to run more services to relieve crowding. Both options are still under consideration ahead of further market engagement. A final decision will be made taking into consideration the value for money and affordability.
Jayne Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 2.
Secretary of State.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Nowhere is the Tory legacy of transport failure more obvious than in the legacy we have been left on HS2. Costs allowed to run completely out of control, communities ignored and misery for passengers baked into the plans. My department is working with the rail industry to minimise disruption during the construction of Old Oak Common Station, including through a £30 million investment in mitigations that will allow services to continue to operate during the disruption.
Jayne Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our railway in the South West is too slow, too fragile and too expensive. Does the Transport Secretary agree with me and colleagues across Cornwall, the South West and Wales, that this new HS2 station will mean slower and more disrupted journeys? And will she agree to meet with myself and a delegation of South West MPs to discuss the mitigation of the legacy she's inherited from the last government to ensure that the South West doesn't suffer now and in the future because of this disruption?
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for rightly raising these issues. I'll be, of course, delighted to meet with her to discuss the mitigations. Efforts will be made to minimise the impact on passengers, including trains terminating at either Ealing Broadway or Reading, but we will, of course, work with her to both monitor and minimise disruption for her constituents.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Traffic delays at level crossings in Egham, Addleston and Chertsey are punishing my constituents, and engineering works and diversion routes just make that worse. Will she meet with me to discuss how we can mitigate and improve our level crossings, especially during these engineering works?
I fully appreciate the implications that Network Rail engineering works have, particularly on the construction and maintenance of level crossings. I'll happily pass on his requests to the Minister for Rail in the other place for a meeting.
Shadow Minister Dr. Kieran Mullan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the ways we could improve the reliability of all our train services is through the reform of working practices like annual leave and weekend working. Agreeing a no-strings deal with ASLEF forced the Secretary of State into agreeing a no-strings deal with the RMT. How does she plan to recover from such a weak negotiating position for future rounds, and what progress has she made on proposals for a pay review body for public rail workers? Our proposal, should I say.
So, I'm sure there must be some relationship to all common. I think we just need to be more descriptive when we're going to ask such a question. Secretary of State, answer as you wish.
To answer that question, though, Mr. Speaker, the 2-year industrial dispute cost the taxpayer £25 million a day every time the Tories oversaw strike days. The reforms that they pursued cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of pounds. We've since settled the national pay dispute and localised disputes on LNER and cross-country, leading to improved passenger services across the country.
Dr. Kieran Mullan. I've got you down as 2, is it not? Right. Okay, we will then move on to Jake Richards.
Mr. Speaker.
Every death on our roads is a tragedy, and for too long they have been treated as an inevitability. The safety of our roads is an absolute priority for this government, and since the general election, the department has begun work on a new road safety strategy, the first in over a decade, which will support our mission to build an NHS fit for the future.
Jack Richards.
Very grateful. Last week I met with South Yorkshire Police to raise the issue of speeding, and in particular the phenomenon of boy racers, which is a problem across my constituency, but in particular in Broome and Sitwell and Wiston, as well as along the A57 around the Todic roundabouts. That was a constructive meeting, but can I ask the Secretary state what steps the government are taking to clamp down on this really dangerous problem?
I applaud the Honourable Member for Rother Valley for raising this important issue. I know the blight that such antisocial behaviour and speeding has on communities, particularly those like he represents. A key part of our Safer Streets mission is to take back our streets, and the government will give police the powers they need to take illegal, dangerous and antisocial vehicles off the streets for good, so that they can quickly be crushed and the vehicles seized from offenders. We're working on delivering that road safety strategy, the first in over a decade, to reduce such tragic deaths and behaviour and injuries on our roads.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Hinckley, we have one of the most bashed bridges in Britain that gets hit on average every 2 weeks. It's on the A5. Now, the A5 also has some black spots for accident and pinch points. Would you arrange for a meeting with me and the Road Minister to be able to talk through how we can get through the improvements that have been looked at for the last few years to ensure that we don't have our bridges hit and we don't have the black spots on the A5?
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for raising that important issue. It's clear with stats like those that needs some attention, and I'm sure my honourable friend will be happy to meet with him.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A50 A500 corridor sees between 60 to 90,000 vehicles passing through it every single day, but the road is slow and unreliable, with average rush hour speeds below 20 miles an hour. The current road is a daily nightmare for residents of Uttoxeter and surrounding areas, and also serves as a significant barrier to economic growth. Will the Minister commit to meeting with me in Uttoxeter to see for herself the upgrades that are needed?
Well, I fear I might be filling up my honourable friend's diary, but I'm sure she'll be very happy to meet with the honourable member to discuss the road in question.
Speaker, road safety is one of the main reasons why young people do not cycle. And this is particularly true for cities like Bath, where historic infrastructure makes it very difficult. What will the government do to help young cyclists particularly to make it safer and make roads safer in Bath?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for raising that point, and it sits at the heart of our ambition to develop the new road safety strategy. The previous government pursued poisonous culture wars against road users of all descriptions. We're determined to take back streets for pedestrians, cyclists and drivers, and that will be at the heart of our new ambition for the road safety strategy.
Shadow Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Road safety is inextricably linked to the state of our roads. New polling suggests... They might want to wait, Mr. Speaker. New polling suggests surface conditions on major roads are getting worse, risking more accidents. So can the Secretary of State confirm, and a yes or no answer will suffice, will her government be maintaining the previous Conservative government's commitment to £11 billion in road repair budgets?
I was fascinated to know, Mr. Speaker, how the front bench would approach their legacy on raising questions today. Again, the legacy that we have been left with has left billions and billions of pounds of backlog maintenance of our local roads. This is one of the biggest issues facing people across the country, and our manifesto committed us to repairing and preventing up to 1 million potholes per year.
Nigel Huddleston.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning, Speaker. As the Honourable Member will know, Network Rail are currently in the process of procuring design for delivery of the western phase of the Midlands Rail Hub scheme, while a business case is being developed for later phases. We would, of course, be happy to meet with the Honourable Member and stakeholders to discuss progress on the programme.
Nigel Huddleston.
I very much appreciate that response. I would appreciate it as well if the Minister could give us some idea of the timing. This is a really important investment for the region and is something that, of course, will add considerably to the economic prospects of the West Midlands.
Well, I thank him for his question, and I do appreciate how important it is to improve rail infrastructure in the Midlands. The next major decision on the first phase will be to consider the release of delivery funding in around 4 years' time, but we're also, in the meantime, expecting in relation to the subsequent phases of the programme to a business case to inform next steps, which will be ready next year, I understand.
Fabian Hamilton.
Question number 5, Mr. Speaker.
The Secretary of State for Transport has met with the Mayor of West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, and discussed the vital role that mass transit can play delivering sustainable economic growth, housing and improved connectivity to jobs, healthcare and education in the region. The Department is working in partnership with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to support the development of the Combined Authority's business case to help bring forward the benefits of mass transit in West Yorkshire.
Fabian Hamilton.
I thank the Minister for that response. Leeds North East is the only constituency in the city without a railway station, and Leeds is the largest city in Europe without a rail-based public transport system. So plans for mass transit networks in West Yorkshire are essential for jobs and our local economy. So will the Secretary of State join with me, or the Minister of State join with me, in congratulating the Mayor of West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, on her plans to build a tram network in Leeds in the very near future?
I thank the honourable member for his question. West Yorkshire Combined Authority has been allocated £200 million of government funding for 22 to 27 to develop a new mass transit system, including £160 million from the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement and £40 million from the Integrated Rail Plan. And of course, I commend the hard work and tenacity of Tracy Brabin as the Mayor of West Yorkshire, who is determined to create a better connected region that works for everyone in West Yorkshire.
Oh, you're standing. Can I just give a little bit of advice? See if you stand all the time, then I know. Tom Gordon.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. West Yorkshire obviously borders my patch of Harrogate and Knaresborough. Will the Secretary of State or Minister of State ensure that a West Yorkshire mass transit that's linked into Leeds connects with places like Harrogate that are just across the border, and we have a combined approach for the entire region?
I'll certainly take the honourable member's contribution in mind and share that with colleagues in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Let's continue the Yorkshire loving with Shadow Minister Sir Alex Outbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will just say to my near neighbour that my constituency doesn't have a train station either. But joining up towns and cities in the north of England is one of this country's great untapped economic potentials. And as the first ever Shadow Minister for Northern Transport and a Yorkshire MP, I'm critically excited about the mass transport system in Leeds that I have personally campaigned on for years. Along with the rest of Network Rail, Network North, it will be a transformative endeavour. But unfortunately, Labour have a history in not delivering mass transport projects in Leeds. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it seems the only deliveries they are interested in as boxes are closed from Lord Alley. So what message does that send to the people of Leeds, to the people and businesses whose lives it will improve? Can he put all of them out of their misery and confirm that this project is going ahead?
I just remind the honourable gentleman that the opposition were in government for 14 long years, and now you have the tenacity to stand there and ask us why we're not getting on with it. Listen, this government is moving quick and fixing things, and we're determined to work with Tracy Brabin as the Mayor of West Yorkshire to achieve her objectives.
Sir Lambos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Practical driving test waiting times remain far too high after the failure of the previous administration to reduce them, limiting would-be drivers' access to opportunities. I have met with the Chief Executive of DVSA and driving test examiners and instructed my officials to work at pace to identify solutions to this pervasive problem.
I welcome the Secretary of State's meeting with the Chief Executive of DVSA to discuss the urgent solutions to the Haigh driving test waiting times. According to the latest statistics, the waiting times in my constituency at the Wood Green Driving Test Centre in my constituency was 18.64 weeks. So will my right honourable friend confirm this is an issue of top priority for the government so that my constituents can be reassured that the driving test times will drastically reduce?
Can I just say, members who've been here a long time, please speak to the chair. We're working through a third party and I'll direct the minister. I'm trying to take some of the anger out of it. Please work with me on that. Secretary.
I'm very grateful, Mr Speaker, and to the honourable member for raising this important question. He's absolutely right. Average waiting times at Wood Green Centre are currently sitting just above the national average, but measures the DVSA are already taking to reduce waiting times include conducting tests outside regular hours, at weekends and on public holidays, and continuing to deploy examiners from areas with lower waiting times. This is in addition to reducing additional examiners across the country into areas where waiting times are highest, but we will set out further steps to the House sooner about how we'll bring down those waiting times further.
James Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for that response? There certainly is and continues to be a problem with test waiting times, but what assessment has been made on the knock-on effect that could occur on the validity of theory tests should delays in practical tests remain and don't improve?
I'm very grateful to the honourable member for raising that important issue. I will take that away and write to him.
Number 7, Mr Speaker.
The Secretary of State has met with the Chief Executive of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency where this matter was discussed. The MCA will continue to monitor this important issue, as well as following up on the actions already taken since the Westminster Hall debate on maritime safety last April.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. If we continue to see this as a matter of legality, then nothing is ever going to change, or certainly not in any decent time frame. We have to focus on doing what we can practically to end the sort of attacks that trawlers from Shetland like Alison Kay and Defiant have been subject to in recent years. Will he look at the experience of authorities in Ireland who have managed to tackle the reckless conduct of trawlers like the Pizorsa Doss and actually to keep their fishermen safe?
Well, not only will I undertake to look at the authorities in Ireland, I had a recent visit to the honourable member's constituency in the Orkney Islands, which I would wish to catch him up about, and would be happy to meet with him to discuss this matter further.
Catherine Atkinson.
Question number 8, Mr Speaker.
Electrification is progressing on the Midland Main Line with the new overhead line equipment from Kettering to Wigston, just south of Leicester, now installed and energised. This, together with enhancements to overhead line equipment south of Bedford, will enable new bi-mode trains to run electric from St Pancras to Wigston from 2025.
Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The full electrification of the Midland Main Line would significantly reduce railway operating costs and cut 42,000 tonnes of CO2 annually. Current work on the line will finish soon, and moving ahead with the rest of the project would retain the multidisciplinary skills and supply chain needed for rail electrification in the UK. The Department has already given us so much good news for rail, so can the Minister give us some more good news on this very important question?
I commend my honourable member's support for this scheme and for being such a champion of the railways and her constituents. I can assure her that delivering greener transport is one of the Secretary of State's priorities for our department. The extension of the electrification from Wigston to Nottingham and Sheffield via Derby is in development and planned to be completed by the early 2030s, subject to business case approvals and affordability considerations.
Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's not electrified, but the West Midlands Railway line from Birmingham to Hereford has seen a dramatic deterioration in its performance since the Secretary of State agreed the no conditions inflation-busting pay rise with the strikers. And I wondered if she could agree to meet with the management of West Midlands Railway to see what steps could be taken to improve the performance on that important line.
Reduction and cancellation.
There has already been improvements in performance and a reduction in cancellations on the railway. I know that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, is working extremely hard to hold operators to account and to ensure that all our constituents enjoy a quality service from the railway. It is essential that we put passengers at the heart for the first time in a very long time.
Andrew George.
Question 9, Mr Speaker.
The Government is working at pace to improve transport provision across the whole country. We already announced 5 strategic transport priorities to improve local transport performance and increase usage. Officials will continue to meet with local transport authorities across the South West to discuss their aspirations.
Andrew George.
I'm grateful to the Minister for that reply. And further to the points raised by my older friend, the member for Truro, a large number of other challenges have been revealed since the general election, including expensive school transport and worries about RIS3 investment in Cornwall, but also on the Isles of Scilly, where we seek parity with Scotland and the mainland in respect of lifeline links to the islands and indeed inter-island transport. So it would be very helpful if, as well as the authorities, if the Minister could meet with local MPs as well, because these issues are becoming very serious indeed. Thank you.
Can I thank the honourable member for his question? Now, all air and sea services operated commercially without public subsidy, and the Department provided support during the pandemic in particular, but DfT officials are committed to regular engagement with the Council there to see how we can improve travel provision on the islands.
Ruth Cabray, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Government's bus reforms are very welcome, but rural areas like Cornwall have perhaps the poorest bus services in England and also have less well-developed partnerships than, say, urban Greater Manchester. So what plans does the Government have to ensure that rural areas in England can benefit from better bus services, as cities certainly will with the Government's reforms?
Well, I thank the honourable member, who is an incredible campaigner on transport matters, not just on our constituency, but across the country. It is true that rural communities have different challenges, but we have introduced the Better Buses Bill, which will give the local authorities to take back control of their buses and improve services where they wish to.
Paul Davies.
Mr Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to answer this question along with questions number 11 and 17. The state of this country's bus services is too often unacceptably poor after more than a decade of neglect and decline. Politicians in my position have neglected them for too long, and it's shown. In September, we moved fast and announced transformative new measures to make it quicker and easier for every local authority in England to have London-style control over their bus services.
Paul Davies.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Public transport is crucial for rural communities, connecting residents to essential services. However, from 2011 to 2023, England saw a 20% reduction in bus services, with a 28% per capita decrease when adjusted for population growth. This decline has severely impacted rural areas like the Colne Valley constituency, leaving many residents isolated and struggling to access education, employment, healthcare and social activities. Can the Minister advise on how the Better Buses Bill will improve the situation for my constituents?
Very grateful to the honourable member, and I know how the premium he places on public transport. I've campaigned with him for it in his beautiful constituency. I'm delighted to confirm that we will be introducing a new buses bill this year to give local leaders the tools they need to ensure the delivery of high-quality bus networks, putting decision-making into the hands of local leaders and seriously accelerating the process of franchising.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Bus services in the City of Durham are an absolute headache for my constituents. Often buses are 45 minutes late in villages like West Drayton. The North East Labour Mayor and myself want to crack on and deliver our manifesto promise to bring buses back into public control. Can she then assure me that the Better Buses Bill will allow us to enfranchise buses sooner rather than later? And will she meet with us both to discuss the bus situation in Durham?
I'm very grateful for the Honourable Lady's question, and the Better Buses Bill is designed to help exactly authorities like the North East. I've met with the Mayor, as has the local Transport Minister, on a number of occasions on how we can ensure that the franchising process is sped up so we can deliver better bus services much quicker for the Honourable Lady's constituent, and I'm sure the local Transport Minister would be delighted to meet with both her and the...
Emma Luber.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My right honourable friend knows that when the previous government axed over 1,000 bus routes, local communities were completely ignored. As she rebuilds our bus network, can she assure me that the Better Buses Bill will make provisions to fully include local voices, not just the voices of those in elected positions?
I'm very grateful for the Honourable Lady, and she's put her finger on exactly the problem with the system that we face across the country at the moment. For too long, we've allowed private operators to pick and choose whatever routes and services they want, with no say for local people or local leaders whatsoever. That is at the heart of our bus service reforms, and it will give local people the proper say in the routes and services that they absolutely depend upon.
And objected.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In my constituency of Huntingdon, there are 8 villages that receive no bus services whatsoever, including Molesworth, where we will shortly see a £500 million investment into upgrading and expanding our defence infrastructure at RAF Molesworth. With franchising potentially to be introduced in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, would the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss how we can guarantee that our rural villages are given the focus they urgently need?
The Honourable Gentleman made the case absolutely for franchising. It's totally unacceptable that entire villages are cut off without the bus services that they absolutely need, denying people the opportunity to move around their local area and get to work or education opportunities. The Mayor of Peterborough and Cambridgeshire is pursuing franchising. We're supporting him in his efforts to do so, and we'll make sure that villages like his are properly included in that franchising process.
Shadow Secretary of State, Helen Wakefield.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And, Mr Speaker, I do wonder if the Right Honourable Lady can see the irony in the new bus system she's so excited about introducing being broadly the same as the train system that she is busy dismantling. But the simple truth is that without funding, their plan won't make struggling bus services viable or affordable for passengers. What has helped is our £2 fare cap. It saved millions of people monies on their fares and helped keep local buses going, especially in rural areas. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the £2 fare cap has been a good thing? And crucially, is she going to keep it?
She's absolutely right that the underfunding of bus services over a decade has led to the cancellation and scrapping of thousands of bus routes across the country, which has declined passenger numbers for the last 40 years. We're committing to consolidating funding and ending the Hunger Games-style process that the previous government oversaw, pitting authorities against each other and creating winners and losers.
Clive Jones.
Number 12, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government recognises the huge benefits of walking and cycling, which supports the government's economic growth, health and net zero emissions by helping to revitalise high streets, improve air quality and support people to live longer, healthier lives. This government will embrace green and healthy transport choices, and we will set out ambitious plans to promote safer, greener and healthier journeys as part of an integrated transport strategy.
Clive Jones.
Mr Speaker, barriers to active travel are many, including railways which need to be crossed via old footbridges. In my constituency of Wokingham, Network Rail are in the process of replacing the footbridge at the Tan House crossing. Despite an offer from the local authority to contribute to the cost of making the bridge accessible to all, they have insisted on spending millions to build a bridge which many people will never be able to use. Can the Minister review with Network Rail why they believe they are not required to make their estate accessible to all and take steps to ensure that they are required to do so in future?
Thank you for your question. I will refer this to the Minister for Rail and write to you with further information on this.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. E-scooters offer an excellent opportunities for promoting active travel, but many of my constituents are concerned at the speed that these e-scooters are currently travelling at. Can the Minister confirm that the government's road safety strategy will look at the issue of e-scooters so we can make sure that they're a safe part of our active travel system?
I believe that micro-mobility has a vital role to play in an integrated transport system. We're looking very carefully at the trial areas that we have across the country when it comes to e-scooters. We'll be looking at what further steps we can take to push forward this agenda.
Josh Barber-Lindley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Alex suffered a life-changing cycling accident at the hands of an untraced driver and is now battling with the Motor Insurers Bureau to get the compensation that he deserves. The Bureau's delays in the compensation process are intolerable and they are undermining his confidence in cycling again. So will the Secretary of State or the Minister meet with me to discuss Alex's case and to discuss how the Bureau can be reformed to restore cyclists' confidence in the system?
I'd be delighted to arrange that meeting.
Have a good weekend. Lisa Smart.
13, Mr. Speaker.
Up again. The Government is making a 5-year, £5.7 billion investment to improve transport networks of 8 city regions from 22 to 23 and 26 to 27 through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlements. We have announced plans to introduce an English devolution bill, which alongside our major bus and rail reforms will equip mayors with the powers and influence they need to create an integrated local transport network and improve local transport in their area, in line with the Government's missions.
Lisa Smart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Hazel Grove, when they're travelling into the centre of the city region, can use the train service subject to landslide issues and, of course, the whims of the train operating companies. But when they're moving around my constituency, they must rely on the bus network. Can the Minister give some clarity to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and my residents about funding the bus model in Greater Manchester so that the burden does not fall upon the 10 constituent local authorities to pay the price of keeping the £2 bus fare cap?
Mr. Speaker, I'm proudly wearing my B Network badge this morning, having visited Greater Manchester to meet with the operators of the B Network and with the Mayor, Andy Burnham. They are doing trailblazing work in Greater Manchester. We've already seen, in the 1 year that they've been operating, a 5% increase in passenger numbers, and buses are turning up on time, which is always great. We will obviously, in terms of funding for the future, that will of course be part of the spending review.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been reading the Treasury's Fixing the Foundations document and understand that because of the need to restore public spending control, the government has had to cancel the Restoring Your Railways programme. However, I note that individual projects will still be reconsidered as part of the Transport Secretary's review. So will the Minister please look at the development of the Abertillery Spur on the Ebervale to Cardiff line as he considers good value investment and connectivity in our railways infrastructure?
The Government is reviewing a number of infrastructure projects as part of the terrible financial situation that we find ourselves in following the terrible damage inflicted on this country by the members opposite.
Yeah, Liberal Democrat spokesperson Paul Colley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In London, connectivity is provided by TfL. But in my constituency in Wimbledon, despite its wonderful tube, tram, train and bus connections, my constituents are suffering from repeated track and signal failures on the district line. While South West Trains is labouring with an ageing rolling stock and decreased frequency of service at stations such as Malden Manor and Worcester Park. Can the Secretary of State tell the House what she's planning to do to address the capital funding crisis she inherited from the Tories across London's transport system? And will she meet with me to discuss the particular problems affecting District Line and South West Trains?
I thank the member for his question. The government remains committed to supporting London and the transport network on which it depends. We're working with the Mayor of London on funding plans for transport in the capital, providing value for money and lasting benefits to the public. And I will, of course, be delighted to meet with the gentleman.
Chairman Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 14.
Minister? Possibly?
Oh, sorry. So many questions, Mr. Speaker. As the government's executive agency responsible for walking, wheeling and cycling, Active Travel England is investigating ways in which to improve the model and forecast cycling levels to ensure that we can invest appropriately. I have asked officers in Active Travel England to meet with colleagues in Sustrans to discuss the potential benefits of their tool.
Chairman Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The brilliant Cycle to Work scheme runs across the 4 nations of these islands. But under current rules, it can't be used if you earn less than £17,000 a year. This is almost certainly contributing to the fact that only 30% of people in lower incomes have access to a cycle, compared to 59% on higher incomes. That's almost double. Now, various solutions have been proposed, including Sustrans' suggestion of a voucher giving 40% off the cost of a cycle. Can the Minister do anything to address this unfair situation and help our national governments to support people in lower incomes who would like to be able to take advantage of the Cycle to Work scheme?
I thank the member for his question. I absolutely recognise the problems that we have with that scheme, and we'll be working closely with our colleagues in the Treasury regarding that. And I was delighted to be at the launch of the report by Sustrans in the Palace a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be paying careful attention to the recommendations that they have placed in that report.
Question 15, Mr. Speaker.
While airports are responsible for their own resilience and financial plans, the Department continues to engage with industry to ensure that operations are as resilient as possible. Furthermore, my officials are actively exploring opportunities for improving resilience of the sector.
Mr. Speaker, aviation at Cornwall Airport Newquay is under threat from increasing regulatory burdens, leading the owners at Cornwall Council to explore costly funding options that could put this aviation business on an even less stable footing, despite its clear benefit as a public good to the local economy. So could the Minister outline the steps being taken to ensure that there is an adequate strategy in place to support airports to meet those increasing regulatory burdens?
Minister.
Can I thank the member, Mr. Speaker, for his question. The UK aviation market operates, as he knows, predominantly in the private sector, and regulatory costs are common in several industries. However, my department works with industry to understand the impact of these costs, and I'm sure that the member will continue to champion the public service obligation route between Newquay and London, which enables more passengers to use Newquay Airport.
Graham Leadbitter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will be aware. Was it the question number? Sorry, question 18, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Very grateful. As the Chancellor set out in her statement, this government inherited a fiscal black hole of £22 billion, including billions in underfunded and unfunded transport projects. We must fix the foundations of the economy. As part of that, I am reviewing capital expenditure in transport to ensure that every penny is spent responsibly, gets best value for money, and that our investment powers growth in every corner of the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will be aware of the ambitions of Scotland and of the other devolved nations in relation to major capital transport schemes, but she will also be aware of the swindling cuts, as she has referenced, made by the previous Tory government to capital budgets, whilst construction inflation rose to eye-watering levels. Will the Secretary of State ensure that the capital funding for transport projects is substantially increased to enable vital connectivities to progress at pace?
I'm very grateful for the honourable member's question, and I've met with the Scottish Transport Minister, Fiona Hislop, and look forward to a constructive working relationship with her. He'll appreciate that spending commitments are a matter for the spending review, but that those negotiations and discussions are ongoing.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a result of underinvestment in
the project that is the Lower Thames Crossing, residents in Dartford are living with a noxious cocktail of bad air quality and disruption to their lives as a result of living near the hugely overcapacity Dartford Crossing. Would my right honourable friend consider making representations to the Treasury in order that the Lower Thames Crossing vital infrastructure project can be funded?
I'm very grateful to the honourable member. The decision around the development consent order for the Lower Thames Crossing is a quasi-judicial one, and I'm afraid I'm unable to comment further than my written ministerial statement this week.
The Government has committed to reforming bus funding as part of our plan to deliver better bus services by giving local authorities the tools that they need to ensure services reflect the needs of their communities in which they serve. We want to give local leaders more control and flexibility over bus funding and allow them to plan ahead to deliver their local transport priorities, and we're considering how best to support buses in the longer term as part of the spending review.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government's Better Buses Bill is an absolutely fantastic example of what a Labour government can achieve and what a Labour government will do, but it will only be successful if indeed the funding is made available to ensure, for example, bus drivers are paid adequately and, of course, local residents have an input into the design, the regularity and the quality of the routes. Can the Minister confirm that this will form part of the bill and that this Labour government will end the Tories' 40-year ideological war on municipal transport?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I agree with honourable friend that I'd like to reassure him that we're committed to delivering better bus services and will always put passengers first. Our forthcoming bus bill is a crucial part of our reforms when it's introduced later in this parliamentary session and will increase powers available to local leaders, because it's local leaders that are best placed to make decisions on their bus networks. And we will remove the Conservatives' ideological ban on municipal bus companies.
Spencer. Number 20, Mr Speaker.
The Government knows that Britain needs a modern transport network to help kickstart economic growth. Under the previous government, the loss of thousands of vital bus services across the country has left too many rural areas with poor transport links. That's why the Government will be introducing a new buses bill to put power over local services back in the hands of local leaders right across England to ensure networks can meet the needs of their communities who rely on them, including Suffolk and other rural areas in England.
Mr Speaker, while I welcome the news that this Government plans to deliver 1,200 UK-made zero-emission buses to help local authorities deliver on their transport ambitions and seize opportunities to embrace zero-emissions transport technologies, may I ask what consideration the Secretary of State and her department have given to the much-needed expansion of EV charging networks in rural communities, specifically those in central Suffolk, to support the rollout of this electric fleet?
We'll be making announcements soon on the expansion.
The Topicals, David Simmons.
Number 1, sir.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I pledged to move fast and fix things, and that's exactly what my department are doing. Not only have we ended the longest ever national strike on our railways, saving the taxpayer millions and boosting our economy, we've passed through this House a landmark bill that, after decades of failure and fragmentation, brings rail services back into public hands. We're taking back control of buses by providing new powers to deliver control to every community in England. We've taken a step closer to greener flights with a new sustainable aviation fuel mandate, and just yesterday I announced new measures to strengthen working rights at sea and prevent a repeat of the P&O ferry scandal ever happening again. Mr Speaker, transport is powering the crucial work of repair and renewal. It underpins each of our national missions, from economic growth to clean energy, and under this government it will serve working people wherever they live.
David Simmons.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituent Frederick Cooksley was sent a fine by the Mayor of London for breaching the ULEZ rules, despite driving on a road where the ULEZ does not apply, a road that provides access to a very important hospital in my constituency. Will she prevail upon her colleague, the Mayor of London, to ensure that, unlike Mr Cooksley, who had to challenge at great length to get his money back, that everyone who's been issued a fine in error for driving on a road where the rules do not apply is automatically refunded?
Well, I'm sure the Mayor of London will have heard that question. We will pass on issues around fining on roads where ULEZ doesn't apply.
Jayne Craft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The proposed Lower Thames crossing, at best, only offers a short-term mitigation to the problem of congestion at the Dartford crossing, but will have a significantly detrimental environmental and quality of life impact for my constituents and feels counterintuitive to the government's net zero ambitions. Given this, what steps will the Secretary of State take to consider the potential for investment in cross-river public transport, including the Kennex tram scheme?
Order. I'm sorry, it's topicals. It was a bad example to begin with, but don't make it worse. I'm sure you're coming to the end now, aren't you?
What steps will the Secretary of State take to consider cross-river public transport?
I thank the honourable member for her question and completely understand the concerns that she raises about congestion in the area. The outline business case submitted by Kennex, the member refers to, was unfortunately unable to progress further after its submission in 2022 as it lacked critical detail. But should alternatives be brought forward, I'm sure they can be looked at.
Secretary of State Helen Wakefield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After just 100 days, this is already one of the most anti-growth governments in history. From investor scaring taxes to the Right Honourable Lady hitting the brakes on our transport infrastructure pipeline, Northern Powerhouse Rail, the Midlands Rail Hub, road upgrades across the country, all on hold. Growth requires investment and investment requires confidence. Can she give some to the businesses looking to invest, to the contractors waiting to get started, and crucially to the communities who so badly need these upgrades?
I wonder if she's spoken to any businesses or infrastructure providers over the last 14 years that suffered appalling uncertainty and a lack of confidence. Her government presided over billions of pounds of waste and failure in the delivery of infrastructure and has cost our economy hundreds of billions of pounds.
Well, I was expecting the Honourable Lady to say something along the lines of wait for the budget or wait for the spending reviews we've heard many times during this session of questions. However, she didn't wait for the budget to give unions a massive pay rise, or to re-announce our plan to get HS2 to Euston, or to signal billions of pounds for a new HS2 light. So if she can make those decisions before the budget, surely she can confirm that every penny of investment that we had committed to transport through Network North will continue to be invested in our country's transport infrastructure.
She can wait for the budget.
Serena Breckenbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dangerous driving is a major concern, particularly following a serious crash in my constituency last week. With West Midlands Police committed to Vision Zero, what additional support is the Department for Transport providing to help local enforcement and campaigns to tackle speeding and other dangerous driving behaviours?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising that vitally important question. Every death on our roads is a tragedy. We expect drivers to observe the speed limit, and of course enforcement is a matter for the police. Last week I met Richard Parker, the Mayor of the West Midlands, to discuss our shared determination to improve road safety.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Paul Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Secretary of State for her recent comments saying it's ridiculous for HS2 to end at Old Oak Common? Can she confirm whether funding for the work necessary at Euston Station has now been secured, and what she's doing to reverse the Tories' equally absurd decision to end the northern leg at Birmingham?
Very grateful for the honourable gentleman's comments. As I said earlier, nowhere is the legacy of the previous government more pertinent than the mess that they left HS2 on. Even under their disgraced plans, Euston was always going to be part of the position on HS2, and we'll be making a full announcement about the future of HS2 and crucially about its cost controls shortly.
Mary Glendon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to hear that the Secretary of State has said that, unlike the previous hapless government, she will prevent another scandal like the sudden sacking of 800 P&O factory P&O's ferry employees 2 years ago. So can she please outline what steps she intends to take to stop anything like this ever happening again?
I'm very grateful for the Honourable Lady's question. The last government took 2.5 years after the P&O ferries scandal and did nothing. In less than 100 days, we are bringing forward legislation that will prevent such a scandal ever happening again, and we are working with operators who employ properly in this space and the trade unions to bring forward protections on rostering as well.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A12 is the major artery between London and the East Coast, and yet it is already busier than most motorways and suffers horrendous congestion and delays. Will the Minister therefore press ahead with the widening scheme, which is in an advanced stage, and without which the government's projected growth targets and housing targets simply will not be met?
Well, I thank the member for his question, and of course I understand the pressures in relation to the A12, but as he will know, the Secretary of State has announced a review of our department's capital portfolio that will support the development of our long-term strategy for transport, and of course there is a budget and a spending review coming up.
Warren Edwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Eurostar services have not called at Ashford or Ebbsfleet International rail stations since the pandemic, with Eurostar stating it will not resume services for some years. And this is having a really detrimental impact on businesses and residents in my constituency and more broadly across Medway and Kent. Will the Secretary of State meet with me, other interested MPs and representatives from the Kent and Medway Economic Partnership to discuss options to restore this vital rail service and help boost economic growth in the region?
I'm very grateful for the Honourable Lady's important question. We share her and her constituents' disappointment at the commercial decision by Eurostar to cease services. We hope to see a reinstatement either by Eurostar or another operator in future, but I will absolutely meet with her, other MPs and local stakeholders to continue discussing this.
Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Government allocations of local highways authorities for road maintenance have been frozen since 2016 and no funding for new roads since 2012. My constituency has lost over half of its funding. Can the Minister investigate urgently how road maintenance funding for local authorities can be restored?
I thank the Honourable Member for his question. There is no greater sign of the failure of the previous government than the appalling state of our roads, and that's why this government has already committed to supporting local authorities across England to fix up to 1 million extra potholes every year, and we'll have more to say on this in due course.
Brace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Exeter is a good and well-used rail system which is vital for the economic and social success of our city. However, 2 of our stations, St Thomas and Paulslow Bridge, are only accessible to people who can climb flights of stairs. Can the Minister please update on work the government is undertaking to make sure our rail network is accessible to everyone?
I thank the Honourable Member for his question and for raising this very important issue of accessibility. We're carefully considering the best approach to the Access for All programme. I'm afraid we're not yet able to comment on next steps regarding projects at specific stations. However, ensuring that the rail network is accessible for absolutely everyone is at the heart of our passenger-focused approach, and I will speak to him about it further.
Sean Barrett.
Oh, sorry, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Minister's capital portfolio review properly considered the health, social and equalities aspects of value for money, and will it therefore be recommending cancelling more road building schemes from the previous government in favour of a real long-term boost in local authority active travel funding?
The capital review and our assessment of the transport appraisal guidance are absolutely considering how we can capture better the wider implications of transport infrastructure funding. We're committed to working with Active Travel England and making sure that all investment considers how we can better promote active travel and public transport use, but we are also committed to road building as well.
Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The deployment of Operation Broke to queue freight lorries heading to Dover on the M20 caused huge disruption and inconvenience for residents and businesses throughout my Ashford constituency. Ahead of the introduction of the new EU entry-exit system, will the government work with the French government, local authorities, the Port of Dover and Eurotunnel to minimise delays and ensure that Operation Broke is only used as a measure of last resort?
I thank the member for his question, and both the Secretary of State and myself have visited Kent a number of times in recent weeks and months. We meet regularly with our colleagues from Home Office, the Cabinet Office and FCDO to discuss the impacts of the new EU entry-exit system, and we will be intensifying those discussions as we approach the implementation date.
Lee, the previous minister promised my honourable friend and myself that he had instructed LNER and Network Rail to ensure that we get our through train from Grimsby to London. Will the minister confirm that she is going to continue these firm instructions, and above all that this train stops? Because if it doesn't stop in Market Raisin, I'm going to lie down on the line and stop it that way.
I do hope that the honourable member will not put himself in such danger. We are working with industry to address timetabling, financial, operational and infrastructure issues that would need to be resolved before a service between Cleethorpes and London via Market Raisin could be introduced once the East Coast Main Line timetable change has been implemented. So we will consider any proposals put forward with approval subject to funding and a thorough business case process.
Marcia Codo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the final acts of the last Tory government was to cancel Access for All funding for Battersea Park Station in my constituency. This is despite there being a costed plan in place with the local authority. It has been more than a decade that this funding was promised. So I ask, will the Minister meet with me to discuss how we can get this project back on track and finally make Battersea Park Station step-free?
Very grateful to the Honourable Lady who has been campaigning on this issue since the moment she set foot in this House. I'd be delighted to meet with her to see how we can take forward this important project.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Local people in Harpenden and Berkhamsted are already blighted by noise from Luton Airport and are highly concerned about the proposed expansion to almost double passenger capacity. Can the Secretary of State confirm what assessment she's done about the compatibility with the government's own advisers, the Climate Change Committee?
The honourable member for her question. Currently, the Luton Airport is part of a development consent order on which I can't comment as Minister, but it's always important to remind people that it's an important balance between noise and economic activity locally.
Pat Rodder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 25 years ago, two trains collided just west of Paddington Station in what was one of the worst rail accidents of recent times. 31 people lost their lives and many more were injured. Will the Secretary of State join with me in paying tribute to all those who were affected by the Paddington rail crash?
Can I thank the honourable member and commend him for his bravery in speaking out recently about his personal involvement in that tragic crash. I'd like to thank the honourable member for Kensington and Bayswater and my officials for attending the commemoration last weekend and join him in paying tribute to the families of the victims and for all those heroes that responded on the day.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in my constituency of Sutton and Cheam have been in contact, as already been alluded by my honourable friend for services at Worcester Park, which have been cut dramatically over the last few years. A resident has complained that prices have gone up by 20% in the last 5 years, but the last train has been brought back from almost 1 a.m. to before midnight. This is not only throttling London's nighttime economy, but it's also causing issues for local residents choosing more sustainable transport choices. Please can the Minister explain when we expect to see improvements in services following the renationalisation of services, which may begin as early as next year?
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable member, and he's outlined exactly the kind of issues that we seek to address through the reforms around public ownership and the creation of Great British Railways. The department is already working with those operators in public ownership and working with operators like Southern, who are not yet, to make sure that the decisions that they make are properly joined up with Network Rail and we can start driving improvements immediately.
The cross-border taxi trade is undermining the high standards set by local taxi companies and the black cabs as a result of failure in regulation. Could the Minister say what she's doing about improving regulation, but also will she meet to discuss the situation in York?
Thank my friend for her question. We're aware of concerns about the current legislative and regulatory framework, and we'll be delighted to meet with her to discuss this further.
Richard.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. The last government introduced the Get Around for £2 bus fare. It's committed to for 5 years in the Conservative manifesto. Given that it's due to end at the 31st of... Of course, Mr Speaker. The last government introduced the Get Around for £2 scheme. The Conservative manifesto said we'd have it all the way for the next 5 years. Will the government at least commit to extending it to the end of this financial year, Mr Speaker, because it's so important for rural bus users, but also those lower-paid workers getting access to employment right across the country?
Thank you for the question. We are obviously looking at the benefits that have accrued as a result of the £2 bus fare and looking at what steps we will take next. Of course, this will all form part of the spending review.
Lauren Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. While the Lower Thames Crossing is under review, can the Secretary of State confirm what steps she is taking to promote river transport crossings, such as river buses, to alleviate congestion? Thank you.
Well, I thank the honourable member for her question. I will ask my officials to look into the issue of river buses and write to her after today's session.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The A36 is a critical route between Southampton and Bath, Bristol. A study was completed several months ago. Given the decision made on the A303 tunnel just north of Salisbury, would the appropriate minister meet with me so we can discuss connectivity and how we can remove the pinch point on the Southampton Road south of Salisbury on the A36?
I'd be very happy to meet with the honourable member to discuss this issue.
Francis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to pay tribute to the Rights on Flights campaign for the work they're doing to improve accessibility, particularly for wheelchair users. What steps could the Secretary of State please undertake? What steps she's undertaking to improve the accessibility of aviation for disabled people?
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for that question. I met with the Rights on Flights campaign very early on after becoming Secretary of State. This is a major issue and we'll be setting out our plans to address aviation accessibility shortly.
Morton.
The last Conservative government ring-fenced funding to the West Midlands Combined Authority for the delivery of a train station in Aldridge. Can the Secretary of State confirm that this is continuing to proceed as planned, will be delivered by 2027, or has she signed away our ring-fence funding in favour of a wider Transport for West Midlands budget to support the Labour Mayor's ideologically driven plan for bus nationalisation?
The West Midlands Mayor's plans for bus services across the West Midlands are predicated on delivering better bus services and better transport across the region as a whole. We will look into where that funding is specifically for the Aldridge train station.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's decision to approve the new Ro-Ro shipping terminal at Immingham. However, she will be aware that that puts more pressure on the local road network, particularly the AE180. Could she bring forward the improvements to the A180, particularly the removal of the concrete surfaces? And long-term, what is really needed is the A180 upgrading to motorway status.
I've heard all about the A180 from the honourable gentleman and the honourable member for Grimsby. I know the issues that it is causing for his constituents, and we will write to him with a National Highways update.
Portugal.
Mr Speaker, the town of Stratford-upon-Avon is one of the most visited locations in the UK, and yet for many years we have not had a direct train to the capital. What steps is the Secretary of State taking to fix Chiltern Railways' lack of capacity so that my constituents and visitors can travel directly and sustainably to and from London?
We're grateful to the Honourable Lady, and it is exactly services and provision like that that the reforms around Great British Railways are designed to address. Decisions around infrastructure and operations will be made together so that we can deliver services that make sense for her constituents, for visitors and for the economy as a whole.
Richard Ford, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 150 parishes in Devon wrote to Devon County Council last year asking for 20-mile-per-hour zones, but only 6 were successful. And those that weren't were told that they could pursue this through so-called community self-delivery. Does she understand what my constituents think, which is that this is what they pay their council taxes for?
Well, I'm very grateful for the Honourable Gentleman's question. It is absolutely my position that if local residents want to design and support local measures around speeding and road safety, they should be supported by their local authorities to do so.
Right, that concludes questions. We'll wait for the front benches to change over.